Welcome to the live show. Welcome to the live show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Craftsman Real Estate Services. I'm Will Frazier, broker, owner, and somewhat cheesy dad, funny guru, says someone. Today, we're going to talk about partners and hard money. So specifically, I'm going to tack on a little bonus cheese at the end about hard money because I am commonly asked my thoughts on hard money loans for investing, and probably the number one question I get asked or I hear discussed in the investing space is how to invest with partners. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? So today we're going to jump in. When you're thinking about investing with partners, what you're thinking about is a relationship. And in the same way that you want to be prudent and thoughtful when you're selecting your spouse, you want to be prudent and thoughtful in selecting your partners. And partners can be a multiplicity of scenarios. You could have 2 people who partner. You can have 3 people who partner. You can have 10 people who partner. And so really, I'm going to use some old trite adages like too many cooks in the kitchen and has the job to throw in here and say, it doesn't matter how many partners you have, so much as it matters that each partner has a job. Like kind of the old Dave Ramsey budgeting ism is every dollar has a job. Like every person, every partner has a job. Now that partner, their job may be I send money, and that's fine. That is a job. One partner's job might be I find deals. One partner's job might be I manage property. It doesn't really matter so long as in the stew that is the partnership, people feel as though everyone is doing a commensurately important or weighty thing. So if you have 2 people, then that should be pretty much easier than 10 people to determine what's balanced, what's fair, what is a win for all people. So I commonly see the discussion of, this person's doing this and they want 50% of the deal, but I'm doing all of this. Is that fair? And especially when we talk about and using other people's money in partnerships, there's a lot of heady, kind of a little bit shameful thinking in this. And so I want to kind of unpack this and kind of supercharge your thinking in this space. So let me set up a scenario that I hear discussed constantly. So you got a person that is scouring the market. They're doing Brandon Turner's recommended, daily 10 or, however many deal analyses. And most of it's trash. Most of it's not going anywhere. And most of it is just like, well, this is just overpriced. This is a retail sale, and it's not going to work as an investment. But then they find that one, and it's a little bigger than they had thought. They thought that they would find a $50,000 house, but this one's $160,000. But I'll be darned if it doesn't work. And the cash on cash return is really good, but the cash is more than I have to put in. So what do you do if you have a deal, you've done your due diligence, and you've deep dived into the deal? So much assonance, I know. But then you don't have the dollars to do the deal. If you've done your due diligence and you've done a deep dive into the deal and you've determined that you don't have enough dollars to do the deal, then you might say, how about a partnership? And then you've done all this work, and then you have someone approach you and say, hey, I'll bring all of the money to close. I just want 50%. So there's in each of us this line of what we feel like is fair and balanced and enough or too much. And I see this like 50% or 60 or 70% from the money person discussed a lot. Well, here's the deal. Money is 2 things right now. Number 1, cheaper, and number 2, more readily available than it has been ever throughout history. Why? That's a topic for a different day and excellently explored on the Rebel Capitalist show by George Gammon. So check out that, defer to him. But for the sake of our conversations, what you need to know is there is money everywhere, and everyone is chasing higher returns. They're chasing safety. They're chasing a lot of different things, but money is not scarce right now. It might be scarce for you, but it's not scarce objectively. So when you've got this situation, what we need to know is there are three parts of a deal. There's finding and executing the deal, there's funding the deal, and then there's managing or ongoing care to the deal. So we're going to say finding funding, and management. So if you've done the finding and someone else has done the funding, so far seems pretty balanced. You might determine that you want to structure it differently, but in general, my feeling is that 50-50 is pretty equitable. You know, but that is completely dependent on you and your partners and what you guys can tolerate as far as the distribution of stuff. But then you add this management piece. Management will be an ongoing concern. And I don't necessarily think it's sufficient to hire a property manager and say, okay, the property manager is our management piece, because I'm a property manager, and I will do my darndest to make strategic, vision-based choices for you. But at the end of the day, it's your vision. So you and your partners have to know what your vision is in order to evaluate the recommendations that I'm going to bring you. I'm going to recommend that instead of spending $1,500 on repairing a bathroom problem, we spend $3,000 in redoing the bathroom floors. Why would I suggest that? Well, we have to do $1,500 worth of work anyways, and that work won't raise the rents at all. But the $3,000 would actually raise the rent a good amount. And so what if we considered this thing that will last for an average of 7 to 10 years with no problems and will raise your rent? Like, you're going to have trouble evaluating that if you don't know your vision. So part of the management piece is that ongoing vision and shepherding of the assets in light of that vision. It will be sufficiently lightened by hiring a skilled property manager, but you can't just simply punt the ongoing management role to a manager, but rather you can have a great ally that will lighten your load in the management. So one person finds the deal, the other funds the deal, and then who's going to manage or who's going to contribute to that piece. And so if one person is funding the deal and the other is finding and managing it, the funding is not more important than the other two parts. Back to the current 2 points. Money is more readily available right now than at any point in history, and it is cheaper right now than I think any point in history. I actually don't have numbers around that. But in light of that, let us not overvalue the money, because the money is easy to send and it's risky. It is risky. Like, I don't want to minimize that. If you are sending money that's yours to a deal where someone else is doing it, and you're relying on some legal documents and some good faith and some agreements to say, well, this is my claim to this, but they're going to find it, they're going to manage it, then you are taking risk in that. And so we don't want to minimize that. But with risk comes return. And so funding the deal does not outweigh the other two combined, because you can wire the money in a minute, but it's an ongoing effort to manage the deal. And then to find the deal is also a rare and valuable talent. So when you're looking at this pie, it's important and prudent not to overweight or underweight the situation. Finding a deal is not that difficult. It is rare and it is valuable, and specific to the deal that you're trying to find, it might be exceedingly rare and therefore exceedingly valuable. But if you're just trying to deploy your capital at a reasonable rate of return in a safe area, that is something that several people can do. But can those people manage? Maybe, maybe not. So putting the right people in places is important. If you have 3 people, convenient. If you have 2, easy. If you have 1, super easy. It's super simple. But if you get more and more people, then it gets more complicated. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, but you should look at the idea of everyone needs a job, and everyone's job should be weighted appropriately. So, if you've got 10 people and one of them is doing all of the management and the other one is doing all of the funding and the other one is doing all of the finding. Now you've got 7 people who their jobs are questionable. And so what I typically recommend is when you're going to these, these higher numbers of partners, that you break it down into roles and you determine how the roles will be weighted, and then you let those roles be split as many ways as possible. So, for example, this is kind of the idea of syndications. You've got 3 general partners or however many general partners, and then you've got a lot of limited partners. Limited partners are funding partners. So like, man, I could have 90 if I wanted to, or I default to a syndicator for this. But the number of limited partners isn't super critical from a operational standpoint because they're not doing anything except funding. But in exchange for the risk they take in funding, they get reward. So the finding the deal and the managing it are the lion's share of the syndicator's business structure. And so we could mimic that and say, hey, same thing. We acknowledge that money is more plentiful and cheaper than ever before. So we're not going to overweight funding. We're not going to say, well, sure, Bill, like you bring 100% of the financing and you get 70% of the deal. So I'll be 30% of the deal and I'll find it and I'll manage it. Like that seems fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. Period. We're overvaluing money, which is cheaper and more plentiful than it ever has been in our history. So let's not overvalue it. Let's not undervalue it. Those people are taking risks. So figuring out what is the breakdown between those roles of finding and funding and managing, and then how do you weight those appropriately? And then if you guys decide that this role, like management, will be 7 people, then split the pie 7 ways. But make those decisions based on contributing what, and let it be something that everyone has good communication about. And so in general, if you need to have all 3 of these parts and pieces in place to do a deal. So if you're considering a partnership, and you don't have management, or you don't have a deal, or you don't have money, like you're going to really need to go and find that. And then when you're inviting someone into a partnership, that's something that this is kind of a base level thing that I want people to understand. And this is a hard truth, I think. When you're inviting someone into a partnership and you have done no deals, what you're inviting, especially from the money side. So money's cheaper and more plentiful than ever, but let's not underweight it. This kind of falls into that camp. When you come to, like, if you came to me and you said, hey, Will, I've got this deal. It's sick, man. It's cash flowing like a king. It's in an A-class neighborhood. And, it's a 17% cash on cash return. And I learned this fancy new acronym, or IRR, and it's like a 32% IRR, and you want to partner with it? It's like, that's the appropriate response. Okay. And then what's the first question? Before I can evaluate any of that, the question is, who are you and why do you think the things you think? If you say that it's a 32% IRR, but you have no clue what an IRR is or how to calculate one, and you read it off some wholesaler's flyer, or you heard your cousin talking about it at a barbecue, and you're like, what's that? Like, if you don't know, then it's not super relevant. It's not relevant at all. It's actually disrelevant, like irrelevant even. That's a word. But if you know your stuff, if you know what you're doing, you have conditions, failed and succeeded before, and you're saying that, irrelevant. Now it's critically important for me to, I want to lean into that and say, I'm interested. Tell me more. Who are you precedes what you're saying. Because if you don't have the credibility, then it's just Twitter. It's just social media. It is voices detached from the brains that speak them, and the moral, like total holistic lives lived by the people who speak them. And that's hogwash, man. So who you are is critically important. So when you're bootstrapping, you're scraping, you're scrimping, you are analyzing these deals and you find one, but you don't have the cash. Number one, be honest about that. Don't overhype. Ask for help. Because if that same person came to me and said, hey, Will, you've done this before. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. And then they ask me to look at their work, and we just walked through that process. And then they said, dude, is this something you'd be interested in investing in? All of a sudden, I am now more invested in the process and interested in the process. And now I've read into the process. So now it's a simple question. Like, I know who you are. I know that you are humble and you're asking for help. And I know the deal because I just helped you walk through it. Let's say you paid me $500 for the consultation. Like, sure, that's an easy hour coffee to say yes to. So we're going to it. And then, yes, Kimberly, I would be highly interested. Why? Because I now know you and I know stuff about you that tells me that this is not a foolish investment. And so you precede the deal until, no, I guess that's always true. You precede the deal at first and you precede the deal at scale because the deal is only as good as the deal maker. One of the things George Gammon talks about quite a bit is counterparty risk. So the idea being, if I went and bought an ounce of gold, what's my risk there? Well, it's risky if it's not gold. And so that begets the question of like, well, if I'm a chemist or a metallurgist with a smelter, and I'm like, oh, hold on, and I take it out to my van, and I melt it down. I'm like, oh, yep, it's pure gold, great. Or what if I melt it down? I'm like, oh, it's gold and silver assayed together. Like, okay, well, great. My due diligence, and my subject matter knowledge reduced my counterparty risk. But assuming that's not true, and assuming like I'm everyone else, I'm going to walk in and I'm going to have to make a decision about the gold, the asset that is largely weighted on the counterparty. What is my risk level based on this counterparty? Oh, this counterparty is the US Mint, or oh, this counterparty is some gold bullion seller who has been in business for 80 consecutive years. Like, okay, there's more credibility there. This is, some dude selling it out of his truck at a swap meet. No. And it's the same thing with investing. We need to not over or under emotionalize it to say like it's personal. It's not personal. It's just survival technique and it's just due diligence for the financing side. So when you're coming into it, especially when you're young in the investing, just call a spade and say, hey man, I've never done this before, but I think that there could be some meat on the bone here. And I'd love to take you out for coffee, pay you a consulting fee, and have you look into this. And then that is a great lead in to say, maybe it's, would you be interested in investing in this? Or, hey, who do you know that might be interested in investing in this? And then if it's someone like me and you ask that, and like, I'm tiny, like I'm a little, and even tiny me has 5, 10, 15, depending on the location and the price point, people that I know are looking for that type of deal. And if I could say, hey, so has this deal, here are the, here's the IRR. It's legit. Here are the numbers. Are you interested in partnering with them? Yes, I want to deploy my capital at a 12% cash on cash return. I'm in, like whatever it is. So imagine if it was someone with much bigger connections than I have. Like, that's amazing. So maybe they're not the ones that fund it, but maybe they know someone who wants to fund it. So just be honest with that and be humble enough to to not use overly flowery, overly inflated words, and not really try to puff up what isn't there. Because if you haven't done it before, if you haven't done it several times, and if you haven't failed in it, and then learn from that, then you just don't know what you need to know yet for it to be a safe investment. But if you'll gain that knowledge, if you'll seek that wisdom, if you'll get that experience, and especially if you do that with your own funds, and then you come and raise funds, like, man, that's awesome. We just need to get there through integrity. And so let me finish this up with hard money. People continually ask about hard money. Is it, what is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Money is always amoral. It does not itself have morals, whether it's hard or soft or squishy. It's amoral. And so hard money specifically refers to money that's collateralized on a hard asset. So your lender, if you go get a mortgage loan, they're collateralizing that loan off of you, the borrower. And if they have to take the house, they will, but you are the primary thing that they're underwriting off of. And you have funds that are much easier to collect, like garnishing wages and and lawsuits and stuff that are a little quicker, ironically, than foreclosure. But if they have to, take the asset and sell it and recoup their money. But our money lenders are almost looking past you at the asset. They're saying, yeah, this house will do. So we need to make the foreclosure process simpler. And yeah, but really the house is solid. Your numbers are solid. So I'll do it. But that trust comes at a price. And, I'm not going to be specific about rates because they're all over the board. But the idea being a hard money lender can move fast like cash, but in order for them to move fast and to look past you to the asset and collateralize based on that hard asset, it's going to come at a premium. So obviously that's a no-go, right? No. So hard money being the speed approximately of cash is interesting because your spectrum is like mortgage loans, bank loans, hard money. Bank loans and mortgage loans are both like, if you want to close in 4 weeks, you better kiss someone, be super nice, and have all of your documents in a row. Mortgage loans are going to be on the long side of those, and then bank loans can be a little faster, but not nearly as fast as cash. And then cash is like, once the title work's done, or if you've got some super wholesaler trick to shortcut that, and like you've got in-house title work, or you're just like, hey, I'll roll the dice, then you can even do it faster than that. But if title work's done, then you can fund, and cash can close after the title work's done. So if hard money can mimic the speed of cash, then it opens up your horizon to things that mortgage loans wouldn't fund, or that sellers wouldn't entertain that closing timeline on. And same thing with bank loans. So you can lean into some deals that are cash because to the seller, it is cash. It's a hard money loan. So you gotta really do some due diligence up front to get your ducks in a row, because if you offer cash and then you try to come in with a lender excuse, then it's not going to work out very well for you. But hard money, in essence, is a cash alternative that's way cheaper than fronting it from your credit card, and paying 24% APR on. So in general, like, let's not get hung up in the line item cost, or the total interest rate of hard money, but let's consider it as an operating expense. So if you need to finance a deal and you need to move faster than banks or mortgage loans can operate on, or if you are not qualified because of self-employment or whatever, then you can't do those other options, then a hard money loan could be a great option. It could allow you to do a deal that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And then how do you compensate for a 14% interest loan? Well, you try to get off of it as soon as possible, whether that's by renovating and refinancing or selling, and you consider it a business expense. So yeah, it's 14% in this example. That's high compared to 4%. It's low compared to 24%, but it is what it is, and it's a business, expense in this flip or in this burr. And at the end of the day, it's a qualified operating expense. It's interest, and so that's pretty cool. But in general, let's not get so hung up on the percentage rates, and let's round the corner and say, hard money is a tool that acts like cash and therefore comes at a premium because it acts like cash, but it can open doors to do deals that cash seems to be the only alternative. And then as far as the percentage, the APR, it's just a line item expense. And so hope you've enjoyed this dive into partnerships and hard money. It ain't funny when your money is covered in honey. It really isn't. If your kids have never done that, to cash, like it is so horrible. That wasn't that funny, but it's been fun to talk about hard money and partnerships. And remember, any question that you have that you'd love to see explored, drop those in a comment below. And if you are with me here, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to be ramping up our content output and be teaching you some incredible things about real estate buying, selling, and investing and a little bit of property management stuff here and there. Be well.